Life Audio.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Empowering Homeschool Conversations. Today, we are going to talk about sensory solutions for helping unique learners thrive at home. And my guest today, I'm thrilled to welcome Anne Laure Jackson Sante to the Empowering Homeschool Conversations. She comes with over 30 years of experience as an occupational therapist and is a clinical specialist in the IRS sensory integration and advanced practitioner in sensory integration. She is an Amazon bestselling author of books such as 7 Keys to Successful Sensory Processing and Homeschooling a Sensory Child with Ease. Anne Laure is also an international conference speaker, mentor, and life coach dedicated to equipping families and professionals with tools to help unique learners thrive. As a homeschooling mom with over 21 years of experience raising her family, she brings a wealth of practical strategies and personal insights to support parents in navigating sensory challenges in their homes. Join us as we explore how to help unique learners achieve sensory success at home, balance family dynamics, and empower parents to thrive in their homeschooling journey. Welcome, Anne Laure.
Wow, thank you.
Absolutely. I'm so excited to have you here today and to talk about this subject. It's something I personally went through with my own kids. I remember a very sensory seeking child that was driving everybody crazy, and then a sensory avoiding child who would run out of the room when I started making anything pork related and couldn't, had to tiptoe through the grass. And, I was at a loss at when my kids were going through this because it was so long ago. It wasn't talked about a lot. And so I am so glad that you're bringing this expertise and your wisdom into this conversation and your resources too. Anne has lots of resources, and those will be in the show notes for you, as well as she'll be talking about them throughout the conversation too. So I'm just excited, and thank you for joining us.
Oh, I'm really looking forward to this. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So what are some common ways sensory challenges might show up during homeschooling, like during lessons or family routines?
I did wonder whether it was easier to start from what happens when you just get up first thing in the morning and maybe take us through the day. And if it gets too long, we can stop and just pause at any moment along the way.
Yeah, no, that would be really good, because I think it's nice to break that down and to know maybe that's something that I didn't think about before, instead of just maybe some things here and there. So yeah, please do.
Yeah, so it kind of starts with what it's like for folks to get up. Some are up and bouncing. And we will not go into those that are starting at 5 o'clock in the morning. We'll just start a regular wake-up time. Some are really happy to get out of bed, and others, it's a very slow thing to get their arousal levels up. So we talk a lot about their levels of alertness. That's a big thing when you're at home and trying to get into academics or catching. We always want to catch our children when they're in their best place to have those teachable moments. So there are times that we follow through curriculum, and then there are other times that we just know that they're very receptive. So very first thing in the morning, getting out of bed, that can take sometimes an hour or two to get our children into a receptive place and a receptive space for academics. Now, obviously, we know home education and homeschooling is not just about academics, but it is a big part of what we do. But anyway, so let's go back. So we've got those who are slow to get up first thing in the morning. Then we might have the issue with getting changed out of pajamas. The transition to changing clothes, if they're cold, if they're depending on the textures, are they bothered by the tags? Are they bothered by the seams in the socks? You can have a meltdown even before you've got into 5 minutes of the day. You have a resistance to change and a resistance to sensory experiences. If it's cold outside, if it's cold in the room, the very basic things are so profoundly important when it comes to sensory processing. And it's not to underestimate the power and the importance of our senses and how we perceive what is going on in the world around us and in our own bodies. And we're not just talking about those 5 senses, we're talking about 7, but maybe 8. But we'll come back to those. Okay, so we've just got up, we're getting dressed, and we might have those fine motor skills, difficulties coordinating, turning clothes the right way around, putting them on in the right kind of sequence. All of those can have a sensory base. Never mind if you can't actually change your clothing and the textures get in the way to begin with. Then we've got toothbrushing, which can be an absolute nightmare in and of itself because of the feel of the toothbrush on the inside of the mouth.
I never thought about that. Yeah.
We can often find anything where the eyes can't see what the body is doing. We have those problems. So you can imagine if you're trying to do your teeth, yes, you might be able to look in the mirror, but often actually to begin with, little children in particular can't reach the mirror often. So they're down there. They're totally kind of like, what's going on? I can't see. So they're totally reliant on their tactile receptors, their touch receptors, and the muscles around the mouth to give them feedback to what is going on. And that can be quite scary. And there's a real reluctance for toothbrushing. So we're like getting dressed, we've got toothbrushing, and then it might be the smell, it might be the taste of the toothpaste. They don't like the mint. What about the texture of or the temperature of the water? That gets in the way. So let's say we've got as far as getting the teeth brushed, and then we have to come downstairs, and then we're into breakfast, and meal times are huge. So I have like a 12-week stress-free mealtime program because picky eating is a massive thing, isn't it?
It's huge. You hear parents talking about it all the time.
So, and we need to look at the sensory base of all of those things that are happening to enable it to be as stress-free as possible, because it is, especially as mums, we want to be there to do the right thing. We want to feed, we want to nurture. It's a part and parcel of what we think we ought to be doing. But our children, when they resist that, it's very easy to feel guilty that we're not doing the right thing, or we're not doing well enough, or we're not doing good enough.
Yeah.
So that's breakfast. Okay.
We're getting there.
We're getting there slowly. Okay, so let's see. Can we sit down? Sit down being an interesting word, but can we sit down to do academics? Now, if you have a sensory seeker like there was in your house, will be very interesting. The ability to sit still is really hard, or you can sit still for a certain amount of time. Do you remember how long on average, or when they were little, how long they would sit for?
It wasn't long, unless it was a high interest activity that he was doing. It was usually, kinesthetic on top of it. So everything, and we did unit studies. That was the only way I survived with that child. And he actually did unit studies all the way through high school because he needed that sensory input when he learned. Yeah, it was just how I adapted.
Yeah, and that is it. Like, so much of what we can do is giving parents permission if they were either schooled themselves and therefore were used to having to kind of like sit at a table and work at workbooks all the time.
Right.
It's giving the permission that you can, even if you do use a workbook, you don't have to be sitting at a desk to do it. So in my own home ed experience, because my boys, I've got 3 boys, my youngest is coming out of home education. He'll be 18 soon. So he will be graduating in his own way. It's like, oh my word, this is very strange moving into a different season of life as a mum. But so I have loads of pictures. We experimented with a lot because I've always intermingled my home life and my work life, because I think that is the most integrating and the easiest way of living. So my boys have been fully assessed with all their sensory needs. Time and time again, as they've grown, every single stage is like, okay, Mum, what do you want us to do now? So it's like, so actually they have done some of the videos that are on the inside of the website to support parents. So it's real families, it's real children, and it's real life.
Yeah.
So absolutely. Where are we at now? So yes, sitting still, you don't have to do workbooks at the table. So they would often, circle round. I would be the one writing the things in the book for them. And they would be going around on their scooters. They'd be going around on their bikes. They'd be just having just walk around the place, or having a bounce on the trampoline. Or we take things outside. We'd go for walks. That's typical home ed stuff when you're out and about.
It really is. Yeah. I think a lot of people need to hear that it's that home education doesn't look like a school, and it doesn't have to. So yes.
Mm-hmm. But I do love books to give. Well, I loved books to give me the structure. I needed that amount, and I could see where we were going. And it's not just an autistic thing to know where the beginning is and where the end is. I think it's a very good human thing that we know where we're going, and we can reverse engineer, we can backwards chain, whatever word you want to use, but we just know where the goal is and we work towards it with flexibility and just go with the flow according to what we're feeling like as parents and where the children are at, and young people according to where their motivations are and what kind of a day it is for them as well, because they have bad days, bad sensory days as well. The brain processes things, and if the brain is if it's been too social, they will not have a good day. They need a day or two to recover, get their regulation back into their system, to be back in that calm, alert state, to be able to apply themselves well to their learning.
Yeah, that really helps in breaking that down, and I love that you stated, that the books are helpful. There's a lot of research put into a lot of the curriculum that we buy, and it's nice to bounce off of the research and the time that those people put into that. But it doesn't mean that they have to dictate how we do school and how we teach. It's just a framework, and it is nice as a parent to kind of have your mind freed and to be able to do other things. We will continue this conversation after a short break.
Christian parents, what college will prepare your student to compete with the best while encouraging them to love their country and grow in their walk with Christ? Patrick Henry College. Located in Northern Virginia, Patrick Henry College is the place for high-achieving, conservative Christian students. Already a top pre-law college, PHC has another one-of-a-kind program, Economics and Business Analytics. EBA takes your business-minded STEM student and produces a graduate capable of servant leadership at the highest levels. Find out more at phc.edu/EBA.
This is Empowering Homeschool Conversations, provided by SPED Homeschool, a nonprofit that empowers families to home educate diverse learners. To learn more, visit spedhomeschool.com.
The other side, it isn't just our kids sometimes that have the sensory issues, it's us as well. How would a parent, assessing their own child, be able to differentiate maybe some struggles that they themselves have in the mix of all of that?
Yeah, my program is there as a family program because as you go through the focus, I think as a parent, you're always wanting the very best for your children. So we always come in first and say, let's have a look at your child, because that's who you're focusing on. And it's only often once the child has been through that assessment process, through doing the stuff online, reflecting back, that then the parents really can see, yes, this is as important for me as it is for them. I think adults are getting a lot wiser, actually, and a lot more clued in, a lot more self-diagnosis. This is not about diagnosis anyway. This is about recognizing that we're all made differently, we're all designed differently, we're all created differently, we all function differently. And it's about how we can find out what those differences are to support you to function as best you can, to thrive in abundance in the life that we have. So it's that assessment process is just as much for the children as it is for the parents, because we do have that blend of sensory profiles, of sensory thumbprints. That's something that I created thinking that because we're all so unique, we each have our own sensory thumbprint. So it's about finding, what is it for mum? What is it for dad? What is it for child number 1, 2, 3, 4, 22, however many? Every single one is going to be different. And how can we uphold, support, honor the differences and make them work, because there are clashes for sure. But
yeah, absolutely. And what better way to just have a healthy family than to have that understanding of one another, not just myself, but to understand that other people have different sensory needs, and we're equipping our kids with life skills by allowing them to learn that in our home, because then they're going to take that into the world and say, oh, maybe the reason somebody's reacting to me this way has nothing to do with, them not liking me, or it may just be that they're having some sensory struggles, and it may be because of the room we're sitting in, or, on all of those things, instead of just instantly taking it personally or judging somebody. So what great skills to have. I see some people are joining us for the conversation. If you have questions or comments that you would like to have integrated into the show, that's why we're live. We would love for you to put your comments and questions in the feed wherever you're watching from, so that you can join our conversation, and we'd love that. So what are some practical ways parents can adapt their teaching space to support a child with sensory challenges?
Mm-hmm. If we go back to the assessment side of it, what we would look at are those 7-8 senses. So if I can start with that, and then we can look at how those solutions would tie into that. So we look at, for example, if we start with the first one being, so that their visual system, that's a really easy one. Whether they like the blinds up, whether they like a lot of light or whether they don't, whether they're distracted by things in the environment or not. So you just change the orientation of their chair, you change the orientation, or you change the things that they look at. You might want to have them in those little kind of cubicle offices at home. Right. We used to have some of those folding ones. Because there were times it's like, it's just focus, okay?
Right.
We want to go out later. Can you just do this, please?
Right.
So, okay, heads down. Don't look at what anybody else is doing. Just head down. So that's kind of visual. They're very brief examples, but for the sake of time, we'll just go quickly through each one. And then auditory, we've got those who want lots of sound. They might be making lots of sound, which is really distracting to other family members. Right. So how can we use ear defenders? How can we use earplugs? How can we give those who are making the noise like things that they can listen to, so they don't need to distract the others? So it's about who needs the music and when and for how much, and headphones, whether it be to plug in their own music or to stop extra sounds going in. And that's also for parents. Mums, get yourself a pair of ear defenders. It will be a lifesaver for you for times when it's just a lot, because it's a lot having children.
It does get to be a lot, right?
Not that they're always in the house all day, but you know. So that's auditory. What about touch system? Yes, I was thinking when they're coming down to breakfast, there was one family that I worked with, and it was the texture of the seat that they hadn't paid attention to that was stopping the boys sitting and actually having meals with us. So have a look at their clothes, have a look at the texture of the seating, have a look at what it is they have to hold, just have a look at everything that they need to touch. And some will be going out to touch and be touching everything. And you're thinking, just stop it.
Right.
They have that need to fill their tactile sensation, their responses. So we need to fill it in a way that is appropriate. And so we'll come back to that. Movement, their vestibular system. Some people are very cautious of movement and will get car sick really easily, will be very slow or maybe very slow at moving through space. And you've got others who are spinning all the time, and they're upside down, and they're hanging over the sofa, and they're hanging off the door frame, and they're climbing up the cupboards, and all of that kind of stuff. So that's their vestibular system, and we need to make sure that we again feed that or moderate it in such a way that they can function and not destroy the house. So if they're jumping on the bed, let's put it down. Let's put a mattress on the floor so they can jump on the floor instead of breaking a bed. What are the things? Yeah. If you can't afford a trampoline, if you don't have the space or any of that, we have to look at what the sensory thing is that they're looking for. So, for example, if it is jumping on the bed, they get a lot of vestibular input, which is this up and down input, and it really gives them a lot of muscle and joint compression by jumping and getting that input through their ankles, through their hips, through their knees, which is very organizing, very grounding. It's a really lovely sensation, but it's not great when the bed is being broken. So how can we give them what their sensory need is, what they're looking for, but in a way that is appropriate? So, we put the mattress down on the floor, or we'd get a trampoline, or some of the things they can bounce up and down on. to get that stimulation. So that where we're 4 senses or 5 senses proprioception, they might be pushing and pulling other siblings, and it's just like leave me alone, get off me.
Right.
So it's like we need to give them something else that they can push and pull. Therabands and chair presses and do other things, go and take the wheelbarrow and clean up the leaves or whatever it is. Give them a chore, give them a task so they can get their muscles activated and used, regulating and organizing their system without actually getting in the way and bothering their other siblings or parents. So then we've got the smell. Smells can be overpowering, or they're just not connecting to smells at all. Taste is a biggie. Again, really seeking spicy food or not wanting it at all. And then you have interoception, which is hard for toilet training or for controlling people's appetite, because interoception is about feeling those sensations on the inside. So the ability to go to the loo, the ability to know when you're hungry or when you're not, when you need to stop eating, when you're actually full. All of those internal sensations can get mixed up or confused, or they just don't register at all. And you're trying to toilet train when actually they can't feel it. So it's a bit of a waste of time, and it can really bring down children. By trying to potty train them, by trying to toilet train them when they're not ready because they can't feel it. So it's, I can't actually remember what your actual question was. I just knew that I was working through the senses. Oh, yeah, the solutions for home.
Right.
When you can find out what the issues are, then it's like use common sense. But you can't use common sense until you've worked out what the root is. So I'm always, everything I do, is it sensory? Is it behavior? Is it a heart issue? Is it character development that we need to focus on? What are the things that are affecting the behaviors that we see? And therefore, trying to tease all of that out, work through the sensory super system, which is what I've created to help get the assessment, get the roots, and then we can find appropriate solutions and treatments and managements and how best to honour one another in that situation.
Yeah. And that is such great perspective to see those things that we often see as instantly behavioral issues and how they relate to different sensory needs, sensory avoidance, and they come out as behavior, but it's just the way that the child knows how to or feels most comfortable reacting, or how to feed that system that they don't know how else to feed it. And the training that's involved with that is really what's key. But also the understanding comes before the training. So yes, that's really important. We will continue this conversation after a short break.
This is Empowering Homeschool Conversations, provided by SPED Homeschool, a nonprofit that empowers families to home educate diverse learners. To learn more, visit spedhomeschool.com.
You were talking, there's always a mix within our homes of all of this going on when we have multiple children. And do you have any suggestions for families who feel like, we're just constantly battling all of these sensory things, and we have multiple kids? What should they start with?
Start with taking a step back where possible, which I know time even to reflect is really hard, and try and dissect what is going on in their senses. Write the things down, which is the process that I take folk through, but write down what you do know or what you've investigated to tell you. If you're a home ed mum, you are so used to going online and finding information. So some of the parents that are coming through, they are so spot on. They just don't know how to join the dots up. So just do what you can do with the knowledge that you have and work out, just take a step back and look at each child and then see. Sometimes it's not about dealing with a child who is having the issue. It's about how we can work best with those around the child, to support them. Not that they are the ones that are able to cope. It's not that they are having to, sometimes they can really feel, if you're a sibling, if you have an individual who's known to have an additional need, a sensory need, a diagnosis of any kind, it can often be the one that's just like, oh, why do I have to be the one to do this? And why do I have to be the one to do that? And so on and so forth. But in some circumstances, it's beautifully empowering to say that actually you need to take care of yourself. So going back to the whole ear defender thing, it's like, we know we will work, we will do what we can to support this child. But for you, there are things that you need to do to honor and protect yourself so that you're in a better place to be in family when your brother's kicking off or your sister's screaming or whatever it is. So it's about empowering them. Right, let's get the ear defenders on. Or, okay, so we can see something's happening. Okay, your time to go out and do whatever it is you need to do. So it's a full, you have to see each individual child and make sure that each of them has their own exit, has their own strategies to deal with themselves and to deal with the siblings. But there are priorities. And I think if a sibling is harming themselves or if a child is harming themselves, that is priority number one. There's a lot of children who self-harm, especially because their tactile system is overreactive. So those who don't like the hair cutting or the toothbrushing or the tags and the seams, they can be quite anxious, quite stubborn, quite controlling, and may end up self-harming and cutting themselves. But it's their way of being able to cope with their systems that are overreactive. So priority number one, anybody who's self-harming, we need to get in there to help them. Then secondly, if they're harming others, that's when they may start to attack their siblings. Sometimes because they don't realize their own strength. They don't have that grading to understand how strong they are. It literally is they don't know how strong they are. So they use their siblings as, therapy equipment, thinking, well, hey, great, and like thump and bump, and it's just like, ow, and it's like, but they don't realize that they're being so boisterous because their brain is not processing their own senses. They can't feel their own bodies, so they just do what they think is fun, but it isn't actually fun. So find those pressure points, find those touch points. First, are they harming themselves? Make that priority number one. Secondly, are they harming others? And then thirdly, how is it affecting others? Is it more so, and you work down, if it's just something that's a bit socially inappropriate, you might be able to live with that. Because we all know we have to pick our battles. So let's focus on the things that are most important and just have a look at those first. Right.
Yeah. That's really good advice. We do have to pick our battles. And especially when you're first starting this process and you're looking at it, it just seems overwhelming in itself. That there can be so many things that need to be changed or just different strategies for each child. I mean, that alone, instead of creating a family model, which we've been told for so many years, that's the way to do it, but I have found success in parenting my children differently because they're different. And I think that's really, really good advice that we can still hold to a same standard. But how we get to that standard is going to be different for each of us because of how we perceive life and handle life and the skills we have and the skills we don't have. So it's very, very wise. Tara is watching on YouTube and she asked, I probably missed how to sort those things out because that's my first question. I agree. First thing is to think behavior, heart issue. But I think we said first thing to think is sensory, probably, and then follow with behavior, heart issue. But Tara, we were talking at the very beginning of the conversation. You can always go back and listen when we're done. But Anne Laure kind of broke down the beginning of your day and just how a lot of those sensory issues may crop up in just starting your day out. Do you have anything else to follow up with her question there?
Yeah, because I do think that what I love is that sensory strategies are so easy. we don't have to go into behavior management. We don't need to go into rewards. We don't need to go into discipline, punishments, depending where people are at with their whole parenting style.
Right.
We can leave all of that aside, because if it's sensory, it's not, it isn't their character. It isn't, they're not being bad, that there aren't other issues that we need to deal with. But we will only know if it's sensory if we use sensory strategies, because the beautiful thing about sensory processing is that it works. So if we get the right assessment, if we get the right route, then not only does it work if you use a sensory strategy, but they're also really good fun. They're really easy to bring into everyday life. And that's what we want. We need that flow when you're in the home education, when you're homeschooling. Life goes so much better when folks just flow where they're at, rather than thinking, right, okay, this, and then we've got to do this, and we've got to deal with this behavior, and we've got to deal with this. That's not how the best life lives, I don't think. It's about, okay, I can see something is brewing in this child. Like you can tell something's going on, and that is the moment to act. Do they need a break? Do you need a squirt of something for them to smell, just to calm them down a little bit? Do they need to tip themselves upside down for 5 minutes and then whatever? Do they need to exit because actually it's overwhelming? These home ed co-ops, these times that we get together, they're great for the first 20 minutes for some children, but then they've had enough. And it's just, okay, this is the time to exit, because the auditory stimulation is just too much. And therefore we need to go, or they need to go into a separate room while the rest of the family stays and enjoys what's going on. So it's about nipping things in the bud, but not behavioral. It's like, all right, okay, they need to eat something. They need to chew on something. We just need to give them a bit of a cuddle just to settle them. We just need to rock. One of the lovely children that I was working with in one of the special schools was that she, one of her carers realized that just a rock 3 times when she was starting to get agitated just really settled her, and then she could carry on again. So the tiniest things can make a massive difference. And that's where I think, as your mum, as your parent, as your another sibling, when you really know your family members, you can spot the signs that they're starting to go, they're starting to get dysregulated, and then you can quickly get in there to just diffuse a situation that could escalate really, really quickly.
Absolutely. Yes. That's overwhelm happens so easily. And if we can be proactive instead of reactive, because when we get to the point where we're reactive, it's really too late. And so, that was going to be my next question anyways, talking about, conquering the overwhelm, but also for, kids who have trouble focusing as well. What might be some strategies that can help to help them to kind of stay on point, just even a little bit, which I know is hard. Attention spans are short today, no matter what.
It is checking that we've got things at the right level. It's funny. This is one area where I think when it comes to academics, I always look at the academics first and then almost like make it back the way, because if children are interested and motivated, it's even like what you were saying about your own child there, that we can override a lot of sensory processing if we are really keen on something, if we are really motivated. It's amazing what social circumstances people will put themselves in when it's a nightmare for their sensory processing, but because they're motivated to join their friends, they're motivated to do something, they will make themselves cope. But that is why we also have issues in people in their later teens and their 20s, because they're exhausted. They kind of get to like a sensory burnout because they've held it together so much. And so we need to go right back to the beginning. However, that wasn't your question.
That's okay. That was really good information. So I'm glad you put that in there.
So where were we? Remind me again, where were we?
Just talking about the regaining focus.
So it's just checking that we've got something at the right level. Absolutely, to begin with, that we're not even trying to get them to something that they're not even wanting to be there at. But if they are wanting to be there, but there are visual distractions, there's auditory distractions, there's distractions coming from the feel of their own clothes or from the feel of their chairs, there are distractions coming, because if they don't move, their brain is quite unsettled. It doesn't know where the body is. Therefore, they have to tuck their legs underneath them, or they have to wiggle, or they have to jiggle, because every time your head moves, you send information to your vestibular system, you get information sent to your muscles and your joints, and your brain is happy because it knows where it is. It's very grounded on earth. It knows where it is in space. So all of those things can distract from attention, but can also help. So it may be that you actually do need to add more auditory. You might need the music on to help them focus. Often we just think, we need to take things away, but actually, no, we might need to give them more. We might need to put them on a bouncy chair, like a gym ball that they sit on, so that they can actually bounce away while they're working. Do they need to chew on something to help them focus? Do they need to have a different color palette that is stimulating? Do they need some color overlays to engage with the books anymore? Do they need some plates underneath, some colored things underneath their books if they're working on books? There's lots of different ways to help focus, but it's about use the body. Use the body and let them be free to choose, because what children choose is very telling. And a lot of it is giving the child permission to think, okay, I'm not going to tell you how to do this. This is what we'd like to achieve. How are you going to do it? Do you want to be outside? Do you want to be up in your room? Do you want to lie down on the floor? So let them choose their body position. They might want to do it on their back. They might want to be on a ball. They might want you to read while they're on the trampoline. They might want you just ask them. That'd be really interesting. Just ask your child, okay, we'd like to get this done. How would you like to do it?
Kind of make it an experiment almost. How can we, out of all of these things, which would you choose? And I have a living example with this with my oldest, which it profoundly changed my perspective on how he worked. He wrote his best papers while playing video games. It was the weirdest experience for me because I was like, there is no way you can do this and write a good paper. And he did, and he did it all the way through college. And he's like, no, my brain focuses better when I can play. And then I think of something new and I add it. And I was like, well, you got A's all through college English, and I can't refute that. It really did help him. And so now when he's working, he's a biomedical engineer. He designs with 3D modeling. He always has something going on his side computer while he's working, and it helps him to focus. But I would never have thought of that.
Brilliant. And I think, and also well done for that work, because that's what I do now, also going into businesses, into workplaces, because our children grow up and we know what they need. We've sussed it out. They've sussed it out. But will the workplace accommodate it? And we're all about training them for the workplace. We're training them for adult life. We're training them for marriage. We're training them for family life, how to be responsible. And it's like, how do we communicate that to our employees? So that's all part of the process as well that I help folk with. But it's brilliant to know that your son's workplace has been so accommodating, and he was able to advocate for himself as well. And that's
and he works from home, so that makes it a lot easier on him to be able to do that. As long as he does his designs, they don't care.
Brilliant.
So, But Tara's got a question before I continue on with my questions. She says, wondering about solutions for my 3-year-old. She's gotten in trouble for not wanting to transition, so she hides. Would you think sensory first?
Yes. So, and that's where just take some time to think about your 3-year-old and look at the world through her eyes, and go through those 7 senses mainly, because we do have the interoception, toileting, hunger, that kind of thing, but that's more internal stuff that's going on. I normally look at them 7 to see, okay, in the environment where she is transitioning to, how much of a shift is it auditory wise? What different hearing experiences is she having? What visual experiences, the smells, Any tastes? Hopefully not really. But her body, what is her body having to do? Does she have to kind of get a coat on? Does she have to, what are the steps physically that she has to do differently in order to transition? Because it may be that if she doesn't have to get a coat on, she's really happy going out to the car. But it might be that it's just too cold. So therefore you need to put the hat on first. You need to make sure she's nice and snug before she's going to transition. So do check the senses in the transition. Then I would also find something that she can use. I often use the body to help little ones transition in particular. So it would be, she might have a transition doll. I really like the ones, we have Stretch Armstrong. I'm not sure what you have over there.
Oh.
They're kind of like dolls, or both for male and female, that you can pull. They're full of cornstarch, and they're just things that you can use as a transition toy, but uses the muscles. So when folks are really quite stressed, that's why we use chewing gum a lot to chew on. We often have those fidgets. We often have those squeezies, because that's all using proprioception, which is very organizing and calming. So it's using, especially in an anxiety-provoking situation, like any form of transition, use the muscle system. So maybe it's just like, let's hop. If she's 3, maybe it's done, let's jump 2 feet. Let's be a cat. If we need to go down from upstairs to downstairs, that for some is a big transition. So it's just like, how are we going to go down the stairs today? We're going to snake. So that you put them down with their feet, and you try and snake down the stairs instead. So use the body, not only because it gives their mind something else to think about, but because it gives sensory input and using proprioceptive input. So sometimes it might be a ball, and that you can like bash the ball, or you pat it as you move along and you move through space to get to the next place. It could be a massive gym ball that they can roll. It could be something that they can pull. You can kind of do tug of war. Use the body to transition, but have a look at the senses, and naturally, yes, use vision and make sure that she knows what is coming ahead. Why are you transitioning? Where are you going? There might be that whole sense of, I don't know what's coming. I don't know where we're going. So it's using a picture, use the visual system to say, yes, we're getting in the car, but we're going to Granny's, or we're going to the supermarket. So she knows what the transition is for, and therefore can prepare herself for it.
Yeah, I used to do like verbal schedules for my kids, like before they went to bed, and we would talk about what's coming up in the week ahead, what's coming up, in even the month ahead, or what's coming up tomorrow, just so when they were falling asleep, that they kind of had this organized pattern of what the day was going to be before waking up in the morning and not knowing what was going to go on. It wasn't ever a surprise. And I found that alleviated a lot of issues for my kids when I was able to kind of walk them through that and prepare them a lot in advance, even just mentally. But I love those suggestions, because yes, there's so many ways to feed that sensory system in just the changing up how we're doing things, and not shortcutting the needs of our child in the process of trying to do the next thing. Yeah. Tara said, that's good. Thanks. She's in preschool, forgot to mention. So,
okay.
Awesome.
Okay. And it's also if they are in preschool, it's just something, is it Tara? That there could be, depending on her sensory thumbprint, depending what her senses are actually doing, there can be, although they're just an amazing places, they can also be places of overwhelm. So it's making sure that there is enough time for her to regroup and to maybe pull away, bring her arousal levels down, because there's often a lot of stimulation in preschool, depending on how preschools are run.
Oh yeah.
So it's
and the kids tend to hold it all in when they're somewhere where they don't feel as safe, and then you get the everything else when they get home. That's what happened with my oldest when he was in school. That's why he got kicked out. He just couldn't hold it together, and that's why we started homeschooling. But that, yeah, you just,
and that's why, I mean, I'm in schools now. We've just had a government contract that the work that I do can now go into schools. But still, even with the amount of support that I love to give schools, that it's really important for those who choose to have their children in school. Obviously, I didn't, but for those who do, then there's a service for them. But just homeschooling them will halve your issues, certainly from the children that I see, because they're not, the environment can be totally controlled by the family. Yes, there's a bit of give and take with other siblings. Yes, there's ways that you have to maneuver the household, but it's your house. You can do it. It's your children. It's a very different thing to trying to help the school systems.
Yeah, it really is a different environment. You've got so many other factors going on. You can't change the lighting instantly. You can't, things like that we can do in our home environment, or, have somebody get up and move around. And that's super easy as a homeschool parent. The school, not so much. So we have so many freedoms and flexibility to be able to work with our kids and these needs that we're talking about today. You talked a little bit about burnout earlier, and kids hitting that burnout. Is there things that parents can do proactively ahead of time when they know they have a child who is probably more susceptible to burnout because of their sensory needs, to kind of avoid that or as best possible?
Yeah, I think having conversations like these, and all credit to your everything that you're doing to resource and to raise awareness for parents who may not be aware of this, and that it is a real thing, because it is a real thing. This is not children being bad. This is not children being naughty or stupid or anything else. Most children really want to please. They want to please themselves. They want to please their families. They want to please others. And it's if this is, I would have a look. If you're conscious, if you're aware, if you're concerned about the mental health, it will always come down to mental health. You'll see it in their mental health first, what they say about themselves, what they feel about themselves. They may be suicidal. I do work with suicidal children and young people to help them understand the foundations of why they can't control sensory processing. It is something that is part and parcel of their makeup, but we can help their processing and integration so that they are much, much better equipped to advocate for themselves for protection. A lot of these are quite sensitive in their sensory systems, the burnout ones in particular, because their body's always in fight and flight. It's always sending out neurochemicals into the body that is just causing the body to reach a state of exhaustion. So if you see it, start looking into their sensory processing, start finding those regulation strategies that you can bring in every day, and start equipping and empowering your young people that this is a real thing, and it's not because they're stupid. It's not, they cannot talk themselves better. This is not a cognitive thing. From my perspective, if we find there are sensory processing issues, then it is a sensory thing, and we need to deal with it from a sensory perspective, which is a neurophysiological perspective, not how they can talk themselves into coping better. It's a completely different thing.
Yeah, completely. I agree. We've been through some extreme mental health things with one of our children, and didn't see it coming. Just, and it has been such a road. So I just would encourage parents, just try your best to understand your child and what they're going through with these sensory things, because it just escalates as they get older, and they put more of the blame on themselves versus just the outside world, and that just gets so heavy upon them, and it can affect choices they make and a whole lot in their future too. So,
and it's really important as a parent, or for them to hear as well, because that they can be, especially in the home ed homeschooling environment, the ability, the willingness to perform, because people are free to excel in lots of different areas, so people can put pressure on themselves, and it's making sure that as parents you're not putting that pressure on to perform either, and to make sure that there is that freedom, that the level. What I've loved about our home ed experience is that it is the relationship that I have with my boys.
Absolutely.
Is just precious.
Yes.
And actually, if they didn't feel like doing something, or you just have that communication, but don't, just make sure that there's not too much pressure being put on that they need to perform, because that will override. Because you're probably in a really loving environment, and they really love you and they want to do well for you. So it's just making sure that that's not out of kilter, not too much pressure on them.
Yeah. And it's hard because, we have standards that we feel like we almost have to live up to. But, the standard, like you were talking about, Anne Laure, is the standard is the relationship. That is what's going to carry that child through. Yeah. Beyond anything that they have learned, the grades that they have gotten while you're teaching them. And it's just a good thing to be reminded of on a consistent basis, especially when you have little ones and you don't see the full picture always all the time. As they get older, it becomes more apparent and even more crucial. And so that's important. Leslie asked a question about speaking about mixed dominance in relationship to sensory challenges. I don't quite understand that question. You probably do. So I will leave that to you.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. So, that's because we've spoken a lot about the kind of sensory seeking, sensory avoidant, overreactivity, if they're underreactive, part of perception discrimination, all of those aspects of sensory processing. Mixed dominance is the other bit of sensory processing and integration, which is the sensory-based motor issues, sometimes called disorders, but we can talk for ages as to whether you want to use that language or not. I talk about just differences or difficulties. If I understand, the way I interpret that question is about not yet having established if they're right-handed or left-handed. So they might mix their dominance. Sometimes they'll do things with their right hand and some things with their left hand. And that is where I would go back to the assessment. Online, we have different types of assessments, so you can find out the roots of where there perhaps uncoordination or clumsiness, or they may not necessarily be clumsy, but they may just not have that, mixed established dominance yet. And that's just a maturity that they will get there. But if there is that, I always want to see what else is going on in their physical system. Right. And there's about 20 to 30 other tiny little activities that you do with them that shows me whether we need to look at it more significantly. Because it might be one thing, but there could be 10 things that it is going to affect as your child grows up if we don't deal with it. Mm-hmm. So as far as mixed dominance is concerned, it could be a crossing midline issue. So we have this kind of like midline in the middle of our bodies, and some will write here and then take over here. So we need to check it isn't a crossing midline issue, which is a much more vestibular proprioceptive thing. So yes, it does have a sensory base. It could be a maturity thing. It could be if you're left-handed, if they are primarily left-handed, then about 25% of the time left-handers do use their right hand anyway. So we would just want to check and see, are they predominantly left-handed, in which case doing some things with their right hand is totally normal, is totally what we see if somebody is left-handed. If you're right-handed, you really don't do much with your left hand at all. If you have the choice, it's right, it's right, it's right, it's right, all the time. So there's a yes, I think, there.
Yeah. Leslie's like, yep, that's exactly what you want to do.
Yeah. So we're looking at it. Is it just a question of a bit more maturity? So we do more physical activities with them, and two-handed things where they have to use two hands separately to do activities. A nice way to see if anybody does want to check their dominant hand. If you give your child two things, 2 pens, 2 drumsticks, 2 sticks from the garden, and you just tap, you ask to tap it one on top of the other, and you see which hand goes on top. And the hand that goes on top is often the hand that is dominant. And so you just present it straight to them. You don't like hand it to any hand in particular. Give them two. Keep it. You're not persuading them in any way, shape, or form. And just tell them that you just want them to tap them together and see which one goes on the top. And that's likely to tell you their dominance. So if they're doing it with their left hand, then you can accept about 25% of their time they may do things with their right hand. But if they go with their right hand, but they're still swapping to their left, then it's worth digging a little bit deeper.
Yeah, that's a great perspective, and simple, easy thing to do to kind of make you question, is that possibly a something that they're struggling with. So yeah, we are wrapping up our time. This has been a great conversation. I would love for you, before we go, to share about your resources that you offer families. And I know you have a couple different websites. And so I'd love for you to talk about that, and how families can connect with you and your services and all that you offer.
Yeah, thank you. Because this is a worldwide service, so that there are folks across the world who come in, and it is an online training, coaching program with a community as well. So everything to do with sensory processing, we take you through understanding, seeking, avoiding all those issues and those sensory-based motor issues. We look at how you can assess it at home. You're the expert in your child. I'm the expert in sensory processing, and it's very much about working together. So we put 2 and 2 together between us, and then we work out a treatment plan, things that you can do at home. And I've got lots of videos on the inside of the website, AnneLaureJackson.com. And then we look at how we can communicate to grandparents, how we can communicate to clubs, how we can communicate to workplaces, how we can help them advocate for themselves, for their sensory needs to continue to be met so that they can thrive. So that's the online sensory super system. And there is also something for those who enjoy the church experience, or who would like to enjoy church but just can't because it's just too stressful. Then there is a sensoryhealthychurch.com program, or you can do AnneLaureJackson.com/church. That's a free resource, 3 hours worth of research that I did, solutions and ways to introduce this to help you bring it into church, whether you're a member or a leader. There's the books, as you mentioned, Homeschooling, A Sensory Child with Ease, that's on Amazon. Various other books are out there, but I just love the online support for training and equipping you. I think when you're a home ed mum, you realize actually with a little bit of knowledge, we can do amazing things. And I want to support families to be able to do everything that it possibly can do to have a really happy home life, because I've loved, I just love my family, and we have had, I'm just really precious. So I just want to support other families as much as possible through that. So thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. This has been so encouraging and just inspiring. And I know our viewers that have been interacting, they have they felt that, you've hit the nail on the head with some of the things that they were questioning too. So that's really what we're all about, is just helping families find solutions. And these solutions don't have to be expensive or, or take a lot of your time. So Anne is there to help. Definitely check out her website. We're going to share both those links. They'll be hyperlinked in the show notes. So wherever you're watching or listening from, you can click on those instead of trying to figure out how to spell them. We'll have that figured out for you. And so definitely connect with her and her resources, and especially if you're feeling kind of overwhelmed and where do we start? Otherwise, just apply a couple things and see where they go on what we talked about today. So thank you so much. I just really appreciate this conversation and getting to know you better as we've chatted today.
Peggy, it's such a delight. I'm so thank you. Thank you so much for the opportunity to share this and be part of what you do and how you do it. It's beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you all for joining us today on this on this episode of Empowering Homeschool Conversations. If you're looking for more resources, support, and encouragement on your homeschooling journey, be sure to visit us at Homeschool Heroes, powered by SPED Homeschool. At Homeschool Heroes, you'll find free downloads, a supportive community of parents, homeschool-friendly providers, and expert consultants ready to help you teach your child with confidence. Plus, explore tools, products, and services designed to simplify your homeschooling efforts, all from a trusted nonprofit that understands the unique challenges of homeschooling children with learning differences. Join us today at spedhomeschool.com to connect with resources, inspiration, and a community that's here for you every step of the way. Let's make your homeschooling journey extraordinary. And you'll want to join us next week. We are going to be talking about brain-based solutions for executive functioning success with a guest that is on often, and she's actually the chairman of the board of directors for SPED Homeschool, Dr. Jan Bedell. So she is a doctor in neurodevelopmental strategies, and so you'll definitely want to join us for that conversation. So thanks again, Anne Laure, and also for all of you for joining us, and we'll see you next time right here on Empowering Homeschool Conversations. Bye, everybody.
I want to take just a second to thank the team at Life Audio for their partnership with us on this podcast. If you go to lifeaudio.com, you'll find dozens of other faith-centered podcasts in their network. They've got shows about prayer, Bible study, parenting, and more.
This has been Empowering Homeschool Conversations.
Have you ever attempted to read the entire Bible? Did you do it, or did you only make it part way? I'm John Stange, and I host a podcast that will make it possible for you to make it through the entire Bible, one chapter at a time. I've been hosting the Chapter a Day audio Bible podcast since 2015, and every single day of the week, I read one chapter of Scripture, then follow that up with a time of prayer. And if you're looking for daily insights and inspiration directly from God's Word, I hope you'll give the Chapter a Day audio Bible a listen. You can find it at lifeaudio.com or on your favorite podcasting app.